with them. They said, "What is off the table?"
I mean, it's you know, we did all that arrangements and reduced the deficit to 18 million. It's up to 70 because stuff like fiber didn't come through. A lot of
The public safety and audits and governmental efficiency. You're supposed to officialcy committees. Yeah, we could try that too. I'm Jack Weiss, present are Jose Huizar, who's the chair of the audits committee, as well as Dennis Zine, who's a member of both committees, and Mr. Smith and Mr. Parks, who are a member of public safety. We have a number of items on the agenda that all relate to various disciplinary management issues at the LAFD. Mr. White, if you could please call all of those items concurrently, and then I would invite to the table whoever believes they're supposed to be there to begin making our presentations, which is probably Maggie Whalen, probably Chief Barry, perhaps Commission President, Public, and if you hate, and anybody else who I have skipped. So go ahead, Mr. White, call those item things so that we can...
Item 1, verbal report from the Personnel Fire Departments relative to the Fire Department's proposed Professional Standards Division. Item 2, Board of Fire Commissioners and City Controller reports relative to the Fire Commission Action Plan and a review of Fire Department management practices. Item 3, motion Han Parks Perry instructing the CLA and CO to report on steps to create an Inspector General position within the Board of Fire Commissioners. Item 4, motion Rizar Weiss Gruel instructing the CLA and Personnel Department to report the top-to-bottom process flow chart of the Fire Department's existing disciplinary policies and practices. Item 5, motion Smith Zine instructing the CLA and CO to report on recommendations to provide increased leadership training for the Fire Department's command structure. And item 6, Personnel Department report in response to motion Zine, Perry, and Mizakowski relative to an audit of Fire Department selection and employment practices.
All right. I think is Mayor's office part of this presentation as well? Okay, that'd be nice. So I'm asking at least for the chief and the GM, Mayor, Commission President. Anyone else who believes they ought to be up there? Feel free to sit up there. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Whalen.
Okay. Good morning, council members. When we were before you in November, we gave you a history of the internal problems that had occurred within the fire department since 1995 and steps that had been taken to address those problems. We also discussed our progress in evaluating a proposal for a professional standards bureau that was developed by the fire department and stakeholders within the fire department that was submitted for the 07-08 budget that the personnel department was asked to evaluate. When we met in November, we were still in the planning stages and addressed the creation of a professional standards bureau at a very high level because we had a number of issues that needed to be examined more closely. Since that time, we've continued to work very closely with the mayor, the fire chief, to be sure the proposal would fit within the organization and would achieve the goals of providing a real complaint process where complaints are investigated thoroughly and timely, and addressing inappropriate behavior through a disciplinary process that is both consistent and fair, all the while keeping in mind the city's financial situation. We've also worked with the staff of the CLA, the CAO, and staff of Councilmember Weiss's office. You have before you a plan, and I apologize for not getting it to you sooner, that has yet to be analyzed from a budgetary standpoint. This is not to suggest that there hasn't been a significant awareness of the cost. This proposal is significantly less expensive than what was originally recommended, and we believe it is actually a more efficient and effective plan. Our review consisted of identifying the best practices in other agencies, existing workload, civilian classes versus sworn, remediation activities and intervention, and current litigation and oversight. I know that you would like to hear from the fire chief and get his input, and the personnel department is available to answer any questions you may have.
Chief?
As Ms. Whalen has just stated, we have been meeting on a regular basis with the Personnel Department, CAO and CLA, and the mayor's staff on developing the organizational structure, the positions that would be required to have the Professional Standards Division to work effectively. We have come to an agreement as far as what that organizational structure looks like. There will be a report, if it has not been submitted, will be submitted for the next available time as far as explanation of the organizational chart. I just received the report itself today, so I have not gone through it totally. But if it's in keeping with what we've discussed in our meetings, I think we'll all be in agreement. I would like to have the opportunity to review the report, and if there's any, difference of opinions, we can submit a companion document with it.
Commission President?
Well, I too have to say that I just got the report this morning at about 8:30. The commission, in terms of its citizens oversight, is in agreement with the Personnel Department and with the Fire Department in terms of the scaled back Professional Standards Division. I think there's still some outstanding financial things that, of course, you guys are going to have to look at, but we're all in agreement that we've been working together very hard since the last time we met with you, and I think most of the outstanding issues actually have been worked out to the satisfaction of both the Fire Department and the Personnel Department. So I think we're going to need to take a look at this report. I don't know when there will be a time for the fiscal impact to be added to this. Do you know when that might happen?
I think the CAO could probably respond to that.
Because I think what's at issue now is actually the whole notion of finding the funding that we need to put this thing together.
We would be happy to report back on that issue, and we would need some time, however, to sort through those things.
Yeah, and I think the likely outcome of the hearing today is we're going to ask you and the CLA to go through the report and programatize it, make it look
Yeah.
like something that the government can actually do. But Mr. Weezer?
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to what those numbers look like. My concern is that, well, we're certainly going to give some direction after this meeting to see how quickly we could get those numbers, but my concern is that we have that information with sufficient time for the budget deliberations for next year, and does it look like we will have that information available, ready, and for the council to discuss? Because
Yes.
if we're making a policy decision, I get the sense we would need to go through the council first, knowing that we're going to make it's going to have a fiscal impact for next year's budget, and we need to, it's a long process before we start those deliberations, so do we have enough time to do that?
Just for
And
the
also,
record, how do you
Councilman Weezer, we need to look at it because there's some impact if we're trying to move this forward through this year's budget. I mean, some of the accounts that we've been looking at to fund this. So we actually need to move forward with the numbers, I think, as quickly as possible, because it's this year's numbers if we're thinking about what we can use, and then it will be the full year for 2009.
And that's one of the reasons the plan is phased in. There's a phase one, which we are anticipating will affect this fiscal year, and then there's phase two, phase three, and phase four.
Ms. Whalen, maybe what would be helpful is, can you walk us through the component parts of the report and of the plan?
I'm going to ask Raylyn Napper to go ahead and do that. Raylyn is the individual who worked on the analysis and developed the report.
Or if you could walk us through that, state your name for the record, pull the mic in towards you so you don't have to...
Raylan Napper, Personnel Department. Does everyone have a copy of the report in front of them?
No, we don't have one.
That's a good idea.
I think they can do that now. It being submitted in advance, they can just pass it out to me.
Yeah.
That's the January 11th? Yeah, thank you.
You haven't had a chance to
Meg.
pull my card.
The city attorney's going to say.
If you turn to the back under the attachments, attachments C and D, you'll see colored org charts. I think that'll be the easiest way to go through this.
Lisa, you signed up.
This is the first phase.
Which attachment?
C and D,
Okay?
towards the very back. And if, starting with attachment C, which is just the overview of what the final organization will look like, I'll go over that briefly and then walk you through the phases in the next attachment. So this is the one with only, it's basically black and red.
Starts here.
You'll notice on here there are parts of fire department other than the professional standards division because they relate to it. But the elements of the professional standards division are in red. And so starting at the top left, we have the division head, which is an assistant fire chief, and that position has already been approved and will be effective January 20th. And then an assistant division manager, which for the time being we're saying this classification of Special Investigator 3, that would be a new pay grade. We may use another class. It's going to depend on negotiations and just what will be the fastest and best way to go. But there'll be a civilian assistant division manager, ideally with a legal background, who can provide that expertise as well as investigatory and the consistency, a person who's there longer, because sworn members can be rotated anytime. That assistant division manager will also supervise the litigation section, which is just under that on the right. And as we all know, litigation has recently been heightened, especially employment-related litigation in the fire department. And they've established a system wherein captains assist the city attorney, and it's been very helpful in being able to respond to cases in time and also help with strategy. And so we're dedicating a staff, since staff has been dedicated to that already, staff that had previous duties, we're giving them a dedicated staff, and the assistant division manager will supervise them. Then, starting on the left side, the EEO and Risk Reduction function. Currently, they only have one person dedicated to EEO investigations, which is the Senior Personnel Analyst 2. And then we're giving them 2 new full-time staff there to investigate, in addition to do risk reduction, so analyzing trends and perhaps certain stations and identifying problems or with individuals or groups, and then coming up with strategies to address that early on. And then in the internal affairs section, this is where the disciplinary investigations will occur. And we have a mix of sworn and civilian. Previously, only sworn has done the investigations, and as maybe you recall in the controller's audit, that was a big criticism because you have these people in 2-year rotations and maybe not doing the most experienced investigations, at least not for the whole 2 years. And then they have to return to the field and work with people they maybe have investigated. So we felt civilianizing this function would be very beneficial. And so we have a combination there. Next to the division manager, there are the mediation and effectiveness unit, and we have 3 human relations advocates there. Again, many of these employment-related issues could be headed off earlier on with mediation. And so that's this sort of task force. The fire department has a human relations training section in a different bureau that's currently staffed by Human Relations Commission employees. And so there'll be a natural nexus there between that leadership and expertise and this task force dealing with the disciplinary and EEO issues as they arise. And then over on the right side, under the Fire Commission, is the oversight function. We've proposed a new classification, Fire Independent Assessor, which is like an Inspector General, and accompanying staff there. There's a dotted line to the mayor's office because unlike the the police department, the mayor oversees reviews the work of the fire chief. So there should be somewhat of a dual reporting there, as opposed to where the police commission appoints and reviews the police chief. Any questions on that? I know I went through it kind of quickly. We can talk a little more about the elements in the phased approach.
Where does the city attorney come in on this?
The city attorney, that would be with the litigation function, because these folks are, the captains are being assigned to cases and working side by side with the city attorney. So they're going to depositions, they're in the courtroom, they're, helping with discovery.
How many city attorneys do you have?
There are none in this organization. They're in the city attorney's office.
I think that Raylan had mentioned that we were looking for a civilian who would have a legal background. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, someone who would coordinate within the city attorney's office when these matters require the city attorney, because I can see the city attorney coming forward and saying, now I need bodies to handle this new assignment. Where are we going to get the bodies? He's got neighborhood prosecutors and all the other aspects of the city attorney's office. If they're not included in the equation, I can see him coming forward and saying, I need some bodies to assist with this endeavor.
Well, they already have a division that's dedicated to public safety, to police and fire litigation, so
But have they been consulted on where they're going to come from? Or how they're going to be
There are no new city attorneys necessary. What happened was new staff within the fire department developed to support the already existing litigation functions in the city attorney's office.
It might be helpful if I jump in right here. What we found over the course of the cases that were coming up for litigation was that there was a lack of understanding of the city attorney of the fire department procedures and processes. So when cases would go to court, they didn't really understand some of the things that were being presented by the defense. We found by assigning fire department members to the city attorneys that are working on each case, it would help them to understand the policies, procedures, help them with their strategy. And so we have been doing that. We took people from another function to do that, but we found that we're going to have to keep doing that at least for a while because we have so many cases that are in the pipeline. And so this function would be to assist the city attorney in those cases, assign them to cases to teams of city attorneys or outside attorneys to assist them. In the original development of this org chart, we talked about having a city attorney assigned to the fire department, and through the discussions, I guess they found that wasn't something that was going to be possible because of the cross departments of the city attorney and fire department, and so it kind of fell by the wayside during the course of development.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the line of order from the professional standard division chief, the assistant chief, special investigator 3, that's fine, to internal affairs where you got 1 battalion chief, 3 captains, 3 investigators. So you essentially have 1 captain for each investigator. That seems extremely top-heavy.
What we're doing is we're teaming up the investigators with the civilian investigator with the captain as a 2-person team, which is similar to what we have done, what's being done in LAPD and a few other areas. We found that to work very effectively, to have a team working together on the case as opposed to one person working alone.
Is the captain operating then as an investigator as well?
Yes.
Or a supervisor?
As an investigator.
As an investigator.
That's our current model we use right now as well.
So why not have more investigators who are probably going to be cheaper and 1 captain to oversee them?
Well,
more in a traditional line of order.
Part of the process that occurs during the investigation, and I'm sure Councilmember Park can speak to this, is in doing the interviews of members, we have to order them, compel them to answer the questions, and if they don't, they'll be held insubordinate. Having the uniformed member there to do that is part of that process. So having a civilian investigator coming in to make that order, at least in the current situation, would not be something that's going to work from a labor standpoint. So we have always had our officers be there to do that, to have that order, and then have the understanding of the fire department procedures as well. We get into some of these investigations that has to do with the timekeeping and some of the things that are very unique to the fire department, is having civilian people being able to do that.
But it would seem to me, and maybe I need to sit down with you and talk about this further,
Sure.
but that the majority of the work is done by an investigator. When you come to the point where you're going to do an interview, that's when you maybe need a uniformed captain. But probably 2/3 of the work is done is investigative, which doesn't require a captain to do that.
Well, again, having worked in that unit and supervised that unit, I have found that it works better to have the team, have it paired up. Having civilian, as I said before, they do not have the understanding of the uniqueness of the fire department. And having a uniform just to show up to give that order, to me, is not the best use of that person, nor can they ask intelligent questions just showing up for that interview. I think I've found that it's better to have the pair.
We'll talk about this some more after. I'm not going to.
What I was going to say is,
in terms of walking us through the components, how much more do you need to do to complete your presentation? I don't want to interrupt.
I just wanted to go over the phases and give you a glimpse of how we plan to phase in the approach and brief rationale for that.
But why don't we let her do that, colleagues? Then let's ask questions of the panel. Then we have some other folks here who may wish to speak as well. Let's let her finish her presentation. Okay. No, but go ahead.
Okay. So moving on to attachment D, there should be 5 charts there, and we'll go through those 5 pages briefly. The first page is the way the organization looks at present, because there are some semblances of the components already existing, of course. So just kind of skipping past that, and you'll see those parts within the next phases as they're in the black boxes. And the colored parts are each phase. So if it's black box, it's already existing and will be assessed or changed in a later phase. So moving to phase 1, which is red, we plan to take care of the division managers and together in the first phase. As I mentioned, the assistant fire chief is already about to be on board, and then the assistant division manager. Also, we plan to hire 2 human relations advocates. The plan calls for 3, but part of the cost saving is hiring 2 now, 1 later. In thinking about funding and the cost of everything, the fire department has reached out to the fire commission and the human relations development committee of the fire commission, which has its own budget and for human relations purposes. So they're going to request that these positions be funded by the commission, sort of offsetting the department's budget. Then the EEO and Risk Reduction. These are part-time exempt investigators we plan to hire to do the investigations. Currently, the fire department is hiring, has 2 contract employees. They're city employees who are retired and return to the payroll for not to go beyond 90 days. So those will be expiring soon, and to kind of bridge the gap before bringing on full-time staff, we're going to hire part-time exempt there in the EEO function. Also, because of litigation now is hopefully at a peak, we'd like to staff that up as well. And even though more staff is currently assigned to litigation than this permanent staff, those folks who are doing it now that are in another bureau will be lent to this function. So there'll be enough staff, and then as litigation decreases, we can reduce staffing there. So that's phase 1, and there are the total number of new positions to be brought on, as well as approximate salary costs, not complete cost, but salary cost, and estimated by the top step of salary. And phase 1, we expect people to start bringing on staff effective April, so that'll be the beginning of phase 1, and we'll give them about 6 months to come on board and adjust and get things going before we bring online the second phase. Moving on to phase 2. This is the blue square. This is where we bring online internal affairs, bringing on the civilian investigators and additional variable staff. We've built in flexibility as well as possible cost savings. That's the green staff, and those are variable staff to use as needed and to the ebb and flow of workflow. Again, the estimates of that phase, which will be, if we stay on track from April, this will be beginning in the second quarter of next fiscal year in October, going through March. And phase 3. Here, we hire the 3rd human relations advocate. Again, funding ideally will have already been squared away for that position, but we bring it on now. And then the 2 we bring on permanent investigators for EEO. And so now that section is completely taken care of. This phase is April 09 to September 09. And again, the related costs there. And then the final phase, which is fiscal year 09-10, is the primarily the oversight function. And we've put it here to allow the division to kind of amp up and establish its procedures and basically have something to oversee for this function, so that they will have enough work, and also so that the working group and all the related parties to this function can have time to learn a little more about what oversight can be, because in the city of LA we really only have one model, but in the world I think more models exist. And so we can assess that and better determine what this organization needs. And then we also, those variable positions I mentioned before in internal affairs, we make those regular, therefore you have 3 captains and 3 investigators full-time, because ideally everyone would like to see the fire department conducting more investigations. So, and perhaps with members having more confidence in the process, maybe more things will be brought to the department at that level. So that was a quick overview.
Thank you, Ms. Never. Mr. Parks, you had a question.
I was just going to ask and I think in looking at the charts, and although it doesn't come online to 09 and 10, I just don't think it's healthy for us to put a direct line from the mayor's office to bypass the fire commission, where they're now in the guts of an operation within the department when they appoint the 5 commissioners that respond to the mayor. And that, to me, would appear to be where and how the mayor's input should be going. But if the mayor is in the middle of operationally looking at the oversight, it's very, very difficult at some point to determine who's going to oversee the mayor if these decisions are made. It takes him out of an independent and objective view of what's going on in the department, because now he's part of the operation. And then the other one I was going to ask you, and if I missed it in your presentation, is that we had talked the last time about how the department was going to add more psychologists to their work, their organization. I think it's only 1 for 30, what, Chief, was it 37?
3,600 uniform.
3,600 uniform, and so you're over 4,000 with
Close to just under 4,000.
So you're almost 4,000 employees with 1 psychologist. And I'm just wondering whether there's a plan for that operation to expand, or is that expected to be an expansion of the human relations? Because I just don't think you can continue at the rate we're going and not have significantly a higher level number of psychologists in the mix, because you're not going to get it done just with training. Somebody's got to be out in the field to be there when the firefighters and the civilians need direct help.
Right. They do have an employee assistance program within the fire department that it's my understanding is very effective.
But the employee assistance is kind of like making an appointment.
True.
Yeah, and generally the problem, if you can't get an appointment, the problem might surface while waiting for an appointment. And what I'm looking at is whether you have access to psychologists that wander through your workforce and that are available and visible to where people can get services without having to make an appointment.
We can discuss that with the fire department and get a sense.
And then that other issue is where that dotted line, I just
Right.
think it's not a healthy situation to do that.
Well, I think you raise a good point, and this is one of the reasons why this is in a later phase, so we can figure all those things out. So that'll definitely be taken under consideration. But I think in one way it's somewhat kind of symbolic, and again, just keeping in mind the different relationship as opposed to the police department, and just the reality that the fire commission does not review or appoint the fire chief. So,
But I think the issue is that the mayor appoints the fire commissioners.
is appointed by the mayor.
And,
Yes.
and then just to comment on the earlier discussion on the setup as far as investigations, I think it's a much broader issue than just giving the order to
I agree.
speak.
I agree.
What we found when we had a short period of time in the police department have civilian investigators, the nuances of understanding police work or firefighting allows you to ask the right questions. You can send people out to ask questions, but if you don't understand what the responses are and if those responses are relevant, it's a very difficult
issue of putting an investigation, you might get answers, but because you didn't know question 3, 4, and 5, you can't get into the meat of the issue. Just in the sense of a firefighter understanding, or a, I guess, captain would be in there, they would understand and cut right through the issue of knowing when the answer was relevant or when it wasn't, just and be able to explore it. And you just didn't end up with a report, you'd end up with an investigation.
Thank you. And I was trying to communicate that. Maybe I didn't do it effectively, but that was one of the points I was trying to get across. If I could, I'm sorry.
That's all. Let's let the chief finish, and then Mr. Zahn.
Just want to point out two very important adjuncts to the Professional Standards Division, and that is their disciplinary tracking system, an automated system to where people can make complaints in an automated fashion, which is going to increase the number of complaints because of the ease of it. And also, the other part is the disciplinary guidelines that were agreed upon between the management and labor to set consistencies with the penalties. And so I think those are very important adjuncts to this system. This system doesn't stand alone. Those are going to help to feed into it and make it an effective division.
Mr. Zahn.
That was a question I had. Has this been discussed with the labor organizations within the Fire Command?
The final draft, I think I gave them a copy. We've had so many iterations of this. I think I gave them the last iteration last week. It might have been the one before this, so they are aware of the process that was being going forward.
Mr. Zahn, can you read body language?
Mr. Tufts is
we have representatives here from employee organizations, and if they want to address the committee after this panel, we'd love to have them, but entirely up to them.
The reason I'm concerned about this is that it doesn't get blocked with a TRO or some other legal action where we can't move forward. If they're not part of the organization to bring it, since their members are going to be affected, the Fire Command and also the rank and file, if they're not a part of it and they're not accepting it and they go to court and block it, then we've accomplished nothing. So the concern I have is hours, wages, working conditions, Myers, Millis, Brown, that they be a part. And they may not agree to everything, but we know what's happening right now with the police department and the consent decree, and we're still in that same mode where they're not agreeing to certain aspects. What we try to do is have this resolved where they can agree, and we can move forward to implement for the benefit of the department and the taxpayers. So if they're not a party to it, there's a concern of what happens when they file a TRO and we can't go anywhere and we get stalled. So somehow they need to sign off or somehow be a party, since it is going to affect their members eventually. And you talk about the automated process, more complaints, means their careers could be in jeopardy, promotions, et cetera.
We completely agree.
They need to be a part of it, just for everyone's benefit. The question I have is, how many other fire departments have such a process?
From the survey of best practice, a number do. Again, they're each a little unique, but are you talking about overall the discipline and EEO?
Well, compared to what the fire department currently has, in comparison to what we're looking for, how many departments that you've surveyed have some type of a process where they have an inspector general, internal affairs, actually do investigations like we're looking at?
Well, kind of breaking them up, oversight, approximately 3 others did. And then as far as discipline, well, yeah, and another 3 have this sort of a similar organization.
And the rest don't have anything?
They have something, it just is in a kind of very different form.
And the other aspect of this, the total cost, when it's all built out, $1.78 million?
And again, that's salary, so it doesn't include benefits or office or related costs.
Doesn't include benefits?
Right.
So it'd be over $2 million operation
yes.
annually?
Yes.
The qualifications, we talk about salary schedules here. When I look at some of the salaries, that's obviously the high step of these salaries. Where do we come up with those salaries, and what type of background, what type of experience, what type for your investigators is going to be required, and what type of training for the captains, battalion chiefs, since they're familiar with fire operations, what type of training we're going to invest in, and what's the cost of that, and what type of background do these investigators need to have in order to assume those positions that are all paying over 6 figures?
Ideally, speaking for the civilian investigators first, we're looking, it's a very specialized class, and so we're ideally looking for someone with a legal background and certainly investigatory experience. So to already come to the table with that background. And
would that be an open competitive test for the through the civil service process?
Initially, we're going to be requesting exemptions.
Okay. But eventually, but what about,
And then then we'll test, yes.
We'll see how it works out. Sometimes testing is not the best way to go because these are unique positions that require a pretty unique background and high skill set level. So I think one of the values in phasing this in is so that we can examine each phase to see if it's successful.
and then tweak it as it needs to be?
Yes.
From the uniform side, we have been utilizing several different training classes. One, we've been partnering with LAPD and some of the investigative classes they send their people to, but also some outside private class we've been sending our investigators to give them the training. Particularly now that the new Firefighter Bill of Rights have come out and there's a lot of nuances to that, they're going to change some of our procedures. So we've been sending them a lot of different types of training to make sure they have the background they needed.
And how does this salary schedule compare to LAPD Internal Affairs or Professional Standards Bureau? Has there been any analysis on the comparison?
That I haven't looked at. But
Because I think you might want to look and see how it compares, since there are investigators, Professional Standards Bureau, that do these investigations. I don't know how many are assigned to it, but I know they have over 100. How that compares? Pardon me?
I was told 300.
I was told that. I didn't want to inflate, but I heard there were 300 LAPD that are assigned to Professional Standards doing investigations, and how that compares to what this is going to require.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for this?
Let me just ask one other question. I thought that these investigative positions were more in line with what, if we compare them to the Inspector General positions in the police department, are these different?
You mean like police performance auditor?
What do we call, because I know you went through a great deal of
Yeah.
effort to come up with positions for the Inspector General, and I thought that's what we were trying to get here. Are we creating a different class from that?
No. Special investigator is the same class.
Same class?
Yes.
I mean, same type of skills?
For the most part, I know that in some of our discussions with the Inspector General of the Police Department, he can be looking for a different skill set depending upon the position. You may want somebody who can do trace auditing, and then at other times, what we're looking for are people who have a background in EEO. So, I think that, again, we have to look to see what the issues are and make the selections based on the need.
But it's a similar class?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I have one follow-up question on complaints. Police department, the complaints are generated normally from the outside, from the general public. Fire department, are most of them internal or external?
Just the normal disciplinary complaints are mostly internal, but we have about 200 EMS complaints that come from the outside, mostly bedside manner with paramedics going on calls, and they have currently been handled differently, separately, and what we're going to do with professional standards, have all those complaints come into professional standards, so there will be more complaints than we've currently handled through our normal AJU or Administrative Justice Unit.
The risk reduction section here, that's going to cover employment-related discrimination, disciplinary issues. The health and safety, where will that be covered under the fire department? That's a separate?
We say health and safety, I'm not sure.
Health and workers' compensation?
Right.
Injury?
We had a unit called risk management that was dealing with not only with health and safety, but also looking at the trend, what we can do to lower injuries and work comp costs. Those were the people that we redirected to our litigation unit. We were having so many litigated cases, so much help was needed by the city attorney's office. We redirected them to assist the city attorney. So right now, that's not being done. But as we transition back, they will be put back in their normal duties and be involved in doing that part of it.
So there's a separate division on that, right? And,
yes.
And how would they work together? Do they have to? Not really?
No, they don't.
And there's going to be this whole new focus on risk management, just given the audit that recently came out by Laura Chick. So is this in line what we're creating here with some of the thoughts and issues raised by
Very much so.
the
Yes.
controller's
There's a
risk
big-
management audit? Okay.
Yes, big guiding factor.
Thank you.
Maybe what we should do is ask if the representatives of the employee organizations want to say anything at this point today.
Chair Members Weiss and Weezer, council members, John Miller, President, Chief Officers Association. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for continuing to prioritize this topic and this issue, because we feel that it is important for the overall health and benefit of not only the department, but the citizens of Los Angeles. Second of all, we just had the opportunity to receive the report this morning, and it's not that we're opposed to it. We have reviewed it, and there are some aspects that we do have some concerns that we'll further vet out through discussions with the fire chief, the department administration, and the employee relations office. Second of all, we continue to support Chief Berry and what he's doing. We support the efforts of the Fire Commission. We feel that we are heading in the right direction. As a participant of the stakeholder groups where we were meeting to vet out the various issues, we feel that what I have read so far is consistent and in line with the direction that we wanted to head. So with that, we're going to continue to work with the department and move forward with this to hopefully resolve it and bring back the public trust that we feel is extremely important.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Tufts?
Good morning. I just got the final draft about an hour ago. So I've been working with the administration on the different phases. I haven't seen the phases individually. I just saw the overall picture. We keep talking about the Inspector General. That should be an attorney position. Police, it's an attorney position. I think he has 3 deputy GEs or IGs. Most of our stuff is interpretation. I heard a conversation about we don't have an attorney assigned to the fire department. I think we have 2 advisors to the fire department. Out of a almost $600 million budget, I think we should have an attorney. I think we'd be $13 million richer right now. The civilian, Ms. Whalen made a couple of recommendations on an earlier report. Having civilians doing investigations. It was brought up earlier, and I'm concurrence with the chief and Chief Miller on we should have a uniform and a civilian on it. There's a number of issues that pop up during the year on an everyday basis that are handled by the firefighters or fire department, and they don't get to the level of a discipline just because of the understanding. Right now, we currently have risk management assigned to attorneys defending cases against the city. I don't think that's the proper use of risk management. They should be looking at what we do and addressing that problem before it happens. Anyways, I need to look at this document further to...
Mr. Zine?
Yeah, a couple questions regarding on the side of defense of the fire personnel. The police department has defense reps, particularly has attorneys, they defend officers at Board of Rights and other hearings. Does the fire department provide that, or does the union provide that? If a firefighter is brought up on charges or allegations are made, what's the process in defense of the firefighter?
The labor organizations provide a representative, usually a sworn member from each organization to represent the member.
Do you have attorneys that do that, or just representative members?
Regularly assigned. There are attorneys that either the individual members have paid for themselves, or that, I won't speak for Steve, but the Chief Officers Association, we use our own members of the bargaining unit to represent our own members.
So they're paid for by the fire department to do that mission?
Only when assigned as a representative.
Okay, because the police department has defense reps that are paid by the department to represent the officers. I just want to make sure that we're playing fair.
The department only pays for a defense rep if it goes to a Board of Rights.
Okay, during the other administrative process.
It belongs to the employee organization.
So then you pick up the cost of that?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're playing fair. You know, sometimes allegations are made, they're true, they're not true. They have a right to a defense, and who's going to take care of the defense? That's what a concern, so it's fair for both parties, for the accused and the accuser.
Correct.
Another thing that wasn't brought up is we just have this new law passed January 1st, the Firefighter Bill of Rights, and we haven't had a chance to look at the law and the new proposals to see if they're in line, and there's no conflict. So we're going to be doing that this month.
So that's important, Chief, that
Yes.
obviously we have that.
We've started those discussions, and there's some procedural changes that will have to be made in order to comply with the new legislation.
the policemen have had a Bill of Rights for many years. Is this fire department just coming on for Bill of Rights?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for folks at the table now? Well, I hear what both of you are saying loud and clear, and I think when, as a joint committee, we presumably direct the CLA and the CAO, we're going to ask them to work with you and make sure that you all have sufficient time to work through the issues you see, and also to work through the issues in the new law. Colleagues, there are 2 public comment cards that have been submitted on the items. Alicia Mathis and James T. Smith. So I'll call those comment cards. Mathis and Smith, you each have 2 minutes. You can have it. Oh, it's just.
Hello, my name is Alicia Mathis. I'm a captain with the LA City Fire Department. When people are treated badly, or discriminated against, or sexually harassed, all they want is for it to stop. The city audit found widespread discrimination. Fire chief has admitted to discrimination, harassment, and a broken disciplinary process. Federal EEOC investigation found pattern and practice of discrimination, harassment, retaliation. And the court system now has come to the tune of about $16 million in terms of fire department issues, discrimination, retaliation, etc. Yet our own union has sat before you right now, suggesting that they want to address issues before they become big problems. They say it's only a few people, despite reports saying that it's widespread. The union hired a consultant over a year ago, paying $80,000 out of membership fees to interview members of the department, yet this report has never been released. It's never been released to the department. It's never been released to the membership. It's not been released to those of us who have asked for it repeatedly. It would be the equivalent of the controller commissioning a report and then failing to release it to the public because they didn't like what it said. The fire department has begun to address the issues of discrimination. The commission has done an outstanding job to push for necessary changes. The fire chief presented his plan, yet the firefighter union has failed on many levels to even accomplish the simplest goal of releasing a report that describes how to change some of these issues that have been long-standing in the fire department. As we move down this road, I'm asking for your help, all of you. I know the union meets with you on a regular basis to discuss issues, to release that report to you, to me, and to others that may be interested. So that is my request. As we move down this road, it's going to take all of us to push for the fire department to change, including our union.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, good morning. My name is James Smith, a former member of the Los Angeles Fire Department for approximately 14 months, and a former, always United States Marine who proudly served my country for over 6 years, and in operations in Iraq in 2003. After having served my country in the Marine Corps, I left that one good core group of men and women and moved right on to a wonderful job with the Los Angeles Fire Department. And I'm here today not to snivel or complain, but more to show my gratitude and my appreciation for everything that's taking place here today through the different committees, through the Fire Commission and the things that they have done to take steps forward in righting some wrongs or maybe rehabbing some issues that have happened within the last number of years at the fire department. The new fire chief that we have, that the Los Angeles Fire Department has seemed to be taking steps in the right direction in, there again, righting some wrongs. And when I left the Marine Corps and came to the fire department to follow in my dad's footsteps, I really enjoyed the time that I had spent on the job. And I'm not at liberty to talk about, publicly to talk about why it is that I don't work for the fire department anymore. I have been forced into legal representation. Jim Armstrong is my attorney, and I currently have a litigation against the city of Los Angeles that is to be heard September 22nd in mediation between now and then. But I regretfully have had to file a lawsuit because I care about my job, and I enjoyed serving as a member of Los Angeles Fire Department, a very fine organization, and am hoping that one day in the near future that I will have an opportunity to serve the citizens of LA much as I've served the country honorably. And I'd just like to thank you for your time and all your considerations and what's been taking place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That closes public comment on the item. Colleagues, the thought that I had and that I believe that Mr. Weezer had was that we would submit all these materials to CLA and the CAO and ask them to provide direction and input for moving forward, and to keep in mind the statements that were made this morning, and make sure that all the relevant parties have a chance to be heard in that process. Are there any other questions or comments or thoughts on the matter?
Yeah.
Mr. Weezer?
Yes, Mr. Weiss, I agree with you, but I think if we could give direction to the CAO and CLA to be back in this joint committee in 30 days, I would like to recommend that we mention that we support this report in principle, but that between now and the 30 days that you could refine particularly the budget, get more definite with the numbers. And I'd like to finalize our support, our approval for this, send it on to council within 30 days so that we could get it back with sufficient time for next year's budget. If that's practical, or if that's okay.
I think that's about right. Mr. Parks maybe can give us a better date, but I think we probably ought to hear this after the mid-year FSR's in, so we really know where we're at money-wise.
We should, I think the 28th is the plan for the mid-year. And so if it's into March, we'll have a good idea. Plus, the election on TUT is first week of February, so somewhere mid-February, we'd have a real good idea of where the budget is.
Okay. Okay, well, let's do that, and then Mr. Weezer and I will agendize, have a follow-up here. So, all right, unless there's anything else, that'll be the action on this item. Colleagues, I want to go back into Public Safety Committee because I understand we had one last-minute